I read a story in the Washington Post 16 years ago, and it has stuck with me to this day. The story in the Washington Post, it began with a 300-pound man in a courtroom sobbing. Why was this man sobbing? Well, he was on trial for the death of his son. He had left his son in his car, and the child died. And the courts were looking at that tragic mistake, if it could be deemed criminal. That story stuck with me for 16 years. And since then, I don't know how many times I've seen a story of that tragedy of a parent leaving a child in a hot car. Now, a new study reveals that advanced technologies could significantly reduce the number of hot car-related deaths, particularly among children. Examining 10 tragic vehicle heat stroke fatalities, researchers found that heartbeat-detecting sensors would have recognized an occupant in every case, while emergency air conditioning systems might have prevented roughly 80% of the incidents. Let's talk a little bit more about this with Kristy Arbogast, Scientific Director with the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Kristy, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me on.
It seems to me that these types of stories, like the most tragic stories out there involving mistakes that parents can make, fatal mistakes that parents can make. Tell me about your research here, Kristy, and why you've been looking at this.
Yes, we're very interested in understanding how we can protect children in all kinds of traffic safety scenarios. And these stories, like the one you recounted, were becoming more and more common. In the U.S., there are nearly 40 children who die every year from pediatric vehicular heat stroke, so leaving them in hot cars. And so what we did in our study is we reviewed over 350 real-world cases of pediatric vehicular heat stroke to identify these 10 exemplar scenarios. And then we worked with folks from the industry and other stakeholders to determine whether various technologies that are out there on the market would have prevented these deaths. And I think what we found is that among all the technologies considered, there was not a single one that would address every case. And I think that speaks to the variety of scenarios that lead to these tragic outcomes.
Well, can we talk about the variety of scenarios there? And you know, before we get too much in technology, you know, I know there are people who are listening to this, and I've heard from them before that say, you know, it's inexcusable. It's the parents' fault. I would never do something like that. And you know, after reading so many of these stories, it's just tragedy. And a parent would not want this to happen. But let's talk about that. These different scenarios.
Yeah, I think as we've reviewed these cases, I think there isn't one clear pattern. You know, there's not a certain kind of caregiver that is more vulnerable to this. It can happen to any of us. It is parents that are distracted or going on a different route that morning. You know, maybe dad usually drops the baby at daycare, and today mom's doing it. It can also be in slightly older kids where kids gain access to a car. Maybe it's parked in the garage or parked out in the driveway, and the keys are available for the child to access. And then there's the case where parents leave the child in the car almost intentionally, but not with bad intention. It's, I'm going to run into the store to get a cup of coffee. That's not going to take very long. It's not that hot out. And so I think the important thing to take away from these scenarios is truly this can happen to everyone. So we need to have a combined effort of technology, education, and awareness.
So let's now talk about the technology. We're with Kristy Arbogast, Scientific Director of the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. We're taking a look at preventing hot car deaths for children. So let's take a look at some of the technologies that are available today that we could use to stop these tragedies.
There's really a range of technologies out there, from the most simple to the more complex. On the simple end of things, there's alerting technologies. So these are warning chimes or noises, often that are either GPS based, you traveled somewhere, you got out of the car, it detects whether you opened your car or turned your car off, and it pops up on the dashboard, check the rear seat. So those are fairly simple. I think the question is whether parents and caregivers pay attention to those. The more complex detection technologies are really direct detection technologies. So these are radio frequency sensors that detect breathing and heartbeat. So if the child is left in the car, it can detect whether there is someone breathing in that car. These are more complicated, but have the biggest potential to actually be effective because it is irrespective of the position of the child in the vehicle. But we need to make sure that these heartbeat sensors, for example, don't give false positive or negative readings, so that parents believe the warnings when they go off.
Yeah, and so what's standing in the way of this technology being in more cars? So my vehicle automatically vents, and you can set it for either 30 degrees Celsius or in Canada here for 30 degrees or 40 degrees, will automatically vent. You can set it to also turn on the AC automatically if the interior gets too hot. And just a couple of months ago, they added the use of an in-cabin radar to detect if there's a child in it, right? So that's what my car does. What's stopping all manufacturers from doing this?
So I think there is real interest by manufacturers to understand the best technology that would be most effective. And in our project, we collaborated in our industry university cooperative research center with a variety of vehicle and child restraint manufacturers. They are very interested in these findings so that they can drive implementation of these technologies in their products. I think also our regulators have a role here. In Europe, there is points given in the vehicle assessment programs for having these technologies, incentivizing manufacturers for doing so. So I look to our federal governments, Transport Canada in the U.S., National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and other vehicle evaluation programs to begin to raise the profile of these technologies and incentivize manufacturers to prioritize their implementation.
Most people can't afford to buy a new car, right? Especially if you're dealing with kids and that kind of stuff. Is there anything parents can do? Is there anything parents can do, save buying a new vehicle that has some incredible technology in order to, protect themselves from that worst case scenario?
Absolutely. I think there are some key behavioral interventions that parents can adopt. I think first is this awareness piece. Never leave a child alone in the car, even for a short time. Cracking the windows or parking in the shade just simply isn't sufficient. And so we first need to educate parents. Then I think always check the back seat. There's, an easy way to do that of putting essential items like a purse or a bag in the back seat. So you physically have to go back there when you reach your destination. Another key recommendation for parents that are dropping their children off at daycare is have a system where you request a call from your child care provider if your child doesn't arrive as expected. That can be just a regular thing. So if you aren't there that day and haven't told them that you're not bringing your child that day, they'll reach out to you or another trusted contact. And then I think we as society have a role. We need to act promptly if we see a child or a pet, for that matter, alone in a vehicle. Call emergency services right away. There are Good Samaritan laws that govern that. And because this can happen so quickly, we have to be engaged society members around this issue.
Kristy, I do have to leave it there. A great discussion. I thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for drawing attention to this important issue.
Kristy Arbogast, Scientific Director with the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia.